Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Excited to have Diane Arnold back from the Family Collective. A little hiatus, but great to have you here.
Yes, good to see you. It seems like I've been gone for
I
a while.
know. It's like 2 weeks, I guess, technically. So pleasure to
Yeah.
have you back. For those new time listeners and viewers, would you mind just sharing a little bit about what you and the whole Family Collective do? And we'll get into our topics for the day.
Yes. Well, website, thefamilycollective.co, info at thefamilycollective.co. And the Family Collective is a nonprofit that was designed to help just that, the family. We are after strengthening it in many different ways. We start with individuals, we work through pre-marriage, marital, so marriages, and then we do I think a great job of working with marriages, and we have lots of resources available, and I'd love to talk about some of those in detail, maybe after we talk about our topic today, and we'll get people connected to the places that they can go and that can help them.
Oh, thank you. And by the way, just the website again is
thefamilycollective.co. I always have to tell people that. God bless my millennials who designed that. I love you guys, but that's CO. I mean, it's like
I know
it's driving people nuts.
Oh gosh. Well, thank you for being here. And I know we're going to get into a little bit today about freedom from fear and anxiety. And people might say, well, what really is fear?
Right. So there's the great question, as a therapist, we have seen such an increase in this. We have reported about 70% of 30 and down saying, I have anxiety. And given what we've gone through, what we're seeing in our newspapers, what's going on in the government, it's not a surprise that that people are anxious, and there are real dangers and issues. Don't misunderstand me, but our fear level has risen. And when I was doing some research for this topic, I came across FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, said in his inaugural address, you'll know this, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Remember that?
Yes, that's who said that. I didn't know. I know it's a saying, not a sign. I didn't know who it was from, but okay.
But here's what was happening. This man's like leading a country through one of the worst periods. It was 1932, during the Great Depression. So clearly people were worked up, right? I mean, I'm assuming there was a lot of fear going on. And so even at that point, he was saying, okay, we got to deal with this is an issue, and we can't live in that place of being constantly fearful. And that level of fear like that puts us into a high alert. And when we're there, that's where our fight, flight, or freeze happens. Our biological activity just goes nuts. And it's intended to help us cope with those adverse situations. But when we live in it, it causes us to have all kinds of adverse reactions. So when you asked, bottom line, what is fear? I want to try to describe the difference between what I'm going to call fear and an anxious state of mind, okay?
Okay, go ahead.
Fear is there's clear and immediate danger. Something's going to cause you pain. There's a threat. There's actually something happening, okay? For instance, someone starts chasing you. You're in clear, or a bad person starts chasing you, you're in clear, immediate danger, right?
Yeah.
However, anxiety is defined as future focused thinking toward a threat, and it interferes with your coping. So that is your brain thinking you might be in danger. So anxiety often hits as soon as you start thinking something might be wrong, right? So if I think I live in a bad neighborhood, right, where there's actually been a bunch of muggings in this neighborhood, right? There's not a huge chance that I'm going to go for a run at dark by myself, right? That's anxious thinking. Even though there's no present danger, my brain starts going, that might not be. And I'm not saying that's bad, but that's what anxiety is. So fears, we're actually in trouble. Anxiety, we have a dread or discomfort, but are not at that moment actually in trouble, in danger. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Actually, I'm glad you broke it down that way, because I have anxiety in a different, but you just explained it. So you're right. Imminent fear,
Right?
imminent danger. Got it. Got it.
So that being said, fear is not bad. So I
No.
think it's a bad rap. You know, I mean,
Fear
if you
could also be like amazing, like you could discover something new, like, just being scared of heights. Like my friend didn't want to jump off the cliff. And
yes,
you did.
yes,
Oh my goodness, it's amazing. Fear could bring
yes,
freedom too. Fear could bring freedom.
right. Breaking through it can bring freedom, right? You know, but if you sat and you spent a bunch of time thinking about that jump and you start getting worked up and you get anxious, but you're sitting on your couch thinking about that jump, right? Right? Now you're dealing with thought patterns, not I'm standing on the edge of that airplane lip, and I'm going to actually one more step. I mean, that's actually fear. And that's actually, there's potentially, you are putting yourself in danger. Let's be honest, when you jump out of a plane, right?
It's so true.
So I think, just to know that there's a downside to anxiety, because unchecked thinking like that causes, emotional, physical, and spiritual distress. And people that don't deal with their anxiety are at risk of developing the disorders, the panic attacks, phobias, OCD, So that's what we want to talk about with people. And we have been blessed by the radio station for you and I to talk about this today. And I think in like 2 days, because it's going to take us a hot minute to go through this.
Go for it. I'm here. All ears.
Okay.
No distractions. Go.
So anxiety, Rob, will limit our life. Some people, and I have been guilty of this, to spend hours worrying and playing out scenarios. And actually, I have been guilty of not only playing out the scenario, but I've figured out what someone else is going to say, right?
Yeah.
Right. And then I get anxious about what they don't even know this conversation is going to be happening. And I'm right. And I'm anxious about that. So, research says we live in an age of anxiety, and it can impact us, our jobs, the way we live, our friends, and our family. And that's when we know it's a problem. And one of the things that I would say is, you just gave a perfect example with that plane. If I sat and I thought about that plane jump,
oh gosh,
right? It's an imagined threat, but it can have the same impact as actually doing it. It can etch a pathway of fear into our brain, right? And one of the examples that I see really often in this is like, say, for instance, emotional abandonment. It's the result of a significant person in your life discarding you in some way, right? Oh no, because my thing is on this. That shouldn't be happening. Sorry, guys. But this type of invisible injury causes great harm to us because we need people. But research has found one of the primary ways to injure someone is to make them believe that they're going to lose significant contact, right? With somebody, the imagined threat. And even when you think of like our prison systems, and I don't want to go there because that's a whole hot topic in itself, but solitary confinement is what people often use for that imagined threat of being without communication, without people, right? That's anxiety. However, there's hope for anxiety sufferers. If you're out there right now and you're going, oh my gosh, this is me, right?
Yeah.
And it's been robbing me, there is hope. And we're going to talk about some ways. But first we want to work our way down to knowing some of those struggles. What are some of the leading causes of anxiety right now? I think we talked about environmental factors, right? So relationships, our jobs, the financial predicament going on right now, right? They can all contribute. A major life event, a death in the family or a loss in the family. But even small stressors like traffic jams and long lines in the supermarket, they can get to us. They can cause that anxiety to grow. Unfortunately, there's genetics in anxiety. It can run in families, right? So people who have family members that are, coming down the line anxious. And I believe that this also could be spiritual.
Oh, yeah, like a past, exactly, past trauma, past life. That's what I hear. Yep.
Pass it on but it can be passed down to you.
Mm-hmm.
Some medical factors, we can take medications that, a doctor actually recently, homeopathic doctor, gave me a very great, I think it was, I can't remember what it was, to help with cortisol or something like that. And it was full of I think it was B and something else. And I finally reached out to him. I was like, every time I take this thing, I go, what's going on?
Yeah.
Right. And so some medicines, whether they're good for you or, something you should be taking, check. Because if you've added a new thing and you're feeling anxious. And then there's brain chemistry, like a TBI, a traumatic brain injury, we see more often than not, especially with vets. But, even people who've had an accident, car accidents and stuff like that, they can, slightly injure that area. And that can be, unfortunately, a consequence of that. And then substance abuse. And I know there are people out there like, I take substances to help with this. Sometimes that will have the adverse effect on you. So I would definitely check, especially if you're, doing withdrawal from that. All right. So are you ready to take a quiz, Jill?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Go for it.
Come on. Okay, ready?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody out there, don't get into a car wreck if you're in a car, but 0 to 4, I want you to kind of rate yourself, and we'll kind of give you a level. And remember, this isn't a diagnostic tool, but it's a way to help you figure out what your next steps might be. All right. So 0 to 4, do you experience anxiety and worry and find it difficult to control? 0, never. 1, rarely. 2, sometimes. 3, often. 4, very often. Okay. Number 2, does worry or anxiety make you feel fatigued or irritable? Really common side effect. 0, never. 1, rarely. 2, sometimes. 3, often. 4, very often. Okay. 3, does worry or anxiety interfere with your sleep or your ability to concentrate? Another huge side effect. So 0, never, rarely, sometimes, often, very often. Okay.
I'm tearing up because I got all 4 so far, but I a lot on my plate, but keep going. I'm with you, but I really have that much anxiety. Keep going. I'm here.
Okay, that's all right. That's right. 4, do you experience repetitive and persistent thoughts that are upsetting and unwanted? And this is very common if you've had an accident or trauma or something, again, 0 to 4, never, rarely, sometimes, often, very often. Okay. 5, do you experience strong fear that causes shortness of breath, chest pains, pounding heart, sweating, shaking, nausea, dizziness, and fear of dying? You know what that is, everybody. It's a panic attack. Are you having panic attacks? 0, never, rarely, sometimes, often, very often. Okay. And I would say, just as a little caveat, don't take this test as happening just today, or this quiz is happening today, or, give yourself a 2 weeks, because some days are better than others. So kind of sit back and go, okay, did that happen yesterday too?
General,
or
overall.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Only 2 left. Number 6, do you avoid places or social settings for fear of a panic happening? And that's like somebody who doesn't like bridges or water or high places, you know. So 0, never. 1, rarely. 2, sometimes. 3, often. 4, very often. And the last question. All right. Do you ever engage in repetitive behaviors to manage your worry? So that would be checking that the oven is off a bunch of times, locking doors, washing hands, counting, repeating words.
Cleaning the floors, cleaning the toilets nonstop. Yes. Obsessive.
Those are a little, some, as you well know, can be a little OCD behavior. So that would be 0, never. 1, rarely. 2, sometimes. 3, often. 4, very often. Okay. So add up your score. And you do not have to, Jill, tell me what's going on.
Okay.
And no one else does either. But I'm going to read just a little bit about where
we would be.
Those ranges go. Okay.
Okay.
So if you got a 0 to 6, you're a very calm person, and your score falls below the range. And that could be that you are just an amazingly well-adjusted person, or it could be you're stuffing a little bit of your fear. And actually, I would say to that person, make sure that you're experiencing your emotions, and maybe it's good. It's all good, but just check on that. 7 to 11, your score shows some mild signs of anxiety. Maybe you're in the middle of a stressful time and your mind's responding to this. Chances that your anxiety will improve as time goes on, but it might be worth keeping an eye on how it's impacting your life. 12 to 16, your score suggests that anxiety has started to get in the way of how you live your daily life. However, do not be alarmed. This is very common, and there are things that we can do to improve. That's what we're going to do here, people, today and in a couple of days. We're going to work on ways to improve. And there are different levels of anxiety, and yours can change from day to day, but it's important to seek help early. The sooner you talk to someone, the sooner you'll be on the road to recovery. And a 17 to 21, so that's a higher score. It falls into the high range, and it's probably got in the way of you going to work, meeting friends, or doing stuff that even matters to you. And please remember that this is not a diagnosis. We're just out there kind of going, hey, that's getting in the way of your life, and maybe it's time to take a look at it. All right. Or to work on some of the things that we're going to talk about. And if they don't work, it's time to look to get maybe someone involved.
Yeah.
So please remember, we are talking about anxiety, but if you ever feel like you need immediate assistance, 1-800-273-TALK, 8255. It's a helpline. You can get someone to talk to you, free and right now.
1-800-273-8255.
Yep, 8255. Yep.
Wow.
So make sure, like, if we've just taken that quiz and you're like, what? That if you're feeling like you need to really talk with someone, they can talk with you, and they can also maybe get you connected to someone, because you'll need to be connected to someone in your state that you live. There are resources at the Family Collective also that you can take a look at. And like I said, we're going to talk about a bunch more. All right. Okay. So there are 2 distinct brain responses to anxiety. Because of the constant chatter between the different regions, we're calling this the fear zone. And no one brain region drives the activity on its own. The fear brain has 2 parts, a cognitive and an emotional. All right. And the cortex, where our thoughts come together, is the cognitive. It's the thinking part of the brain. And this is the part that enables us to reason, create language, engage in complicated thinking, and approaches to treating anxiety for that part are typically focused on the thinking patterns. What was I thinking at that moment? Like you talked in your airplane mode. What was I thinking sitting on the couch that caused me to have the same panic as what was I thinking standing on the edge of that jump spot, right? Okay. And it's important to note that thoughts originating in the cortex may be the cause of anxiety, or they may have the effect of increasing it. Again, what we were just talking about, sometimes we're thinking of things that aren't really even happening to us. That's the anxiety, right? And then we have the amygdala. And that's located, deep inside our emotional brain, our right side of our brain. And it's the zone for the fight, flight, or freeze.
Okay.
And the role of the amygdala is to attach emotional significance to situation or objects and memories, right? But the amygdala is small and it has influence over a lot of our emotional responding. So both the cortex and the amygdala play parts in us being anxious. All right. For instance, if I believe snakes are terrifying, the emotional brain, right? I can rationalize where you headed, this, where you headed, they're very rare. Or the ones that are there are black garden snakes, that's allowing my cognitive zone to overtake the emotional zone. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And I know that we're going to run out of time today to talk about a bunch of these, but we are going to. So if you're listening and you're like, I need help with this, please come back and listen to us, because we're going to spend some time talking in both of those sides of the brain, some very specific things that we can do to work on the anxiety, right?
Mm-hmm.
So please know that there's hope. And sometimes there's coping things we can do. For instance, I'm going to throw my poor husband under the bus. He does not like heights, and the guy is about as calm gets, but heights are not his thing. So tall buildings are not his thing. So because he's not a firefighter, doesn't have to go into tall buildings, it's not going to probably affect his life. Right. So sometimes people out there are things that we can do to adjust. However, if I have to go home,
what if he got a job on like
exactly
the floor of...
exactly exactly, he'd have a hard time going near a window. That's what I said. Yeah. So there's sometimes that we have to solve the puzzle, right? If I am a firefighter, or I live in Charleston, there's a bridge on my way home. If I couldn't go over bridges, this would be a problem, right? Yeah. So sometimes we have to work on this and solve it together. So I think that's probably a great place for me to stop on explaining the fear part of that. But next time we're together, we're going to go over some strategies for the cortex part of the brain and some strategies for the emotional part of the brain that can help us with those. So
I'm interested. I'm like on the edge of my seat here. I really have a lot of anxiety, and it's something I've never really dealt with. I deal with it every day, but I've never spoke to anyone about it. It's affecting my life more and more now with my kids and I'm going to tear up. So today's show really, you got me thinking about things I could start doing, and
yes,
to try to, got to cope with it. It's not easy.
Yes.
Like right now, I'm going to cry again.
No, it's okay.
Not that time of the month. It's just, no.
You and I are dangerous. No, and Jill, you're not alone. It's like I said, we're at 70-80% of people are struggling with this right now. And sometimes I think it's important for us to know, what am I listening to? What am I watching? Who am I listening to? And I'm not against, but I'm like, okay, during COVID, my husband prayerfully said, we cannot watch the news every day, or we're not going to make it. Because it's going to repeat that same fear into us continually, and so there are some healthy things that we can do with the thinking part of our brain that we can really do. But there's also some things. So one of the greatest things that you can do with the emotional part of our brain is learning relaxation, people out there. And it's not a part of our lives anymore, but it needs to be a part where we learn to focus on our breathing, to focus on our emotional relaxing, to focus on things that are like healthy for us in that matter. And we're going to go over a bunch of them. So
thank you. I'm looking forward to it. And
I am looking forward to it too. With just 24 hours, I think we'll be back together. So the Family Collective, really quickly, you want me to? Okay. I'm trying to kind of help you, girl.
No, we got 2 more minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, thefamilycollective.co. So please go on, take a look of us. When you know who you are, and we allow others to be who they are, we begin to form the foundation for true community. And that's what the Family Collective is. It's trying to help you have healthy community by having healthy individuals, healthy couples, healthy communities. So we have a lot of resources out there, and maybe at the end of the talk tomorrow, the next day, we'll go through specifically some of them.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. So I'm looking on the website now, the online courses, the support groups, marriage group facilitators. There's so much more to this, that you all have together. And again, go to thefamilycollective.co.
Yeah, and it's in Portuguese and Spanish right now. So we're in, you have resources if you're not an English speaking person. Not all other languages, but we have quite a few.
Oh, thank you so much, Diane, Arnold, for today's conversation. I needed it. And we're really back 24 hours from now?
Yeah, we're really back.
I didn't know that. Okay,
24
great.
or 48, but we're going to come
All
up with a bunch of solutions soon.
Perfect. I'm interested myself personally as well. Thank you so much for today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, blessings. And I will see you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks again. Okay. Have a fantastic day. To all of our listeners and viewers, stay tuned. Waiting for part 2 on my edge of the seat. Bye. Thank you.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.